Thanks so much for having me, Shaq, and thanks for the nice lead in too, Josh. So my apologies. I've joined just now primarily because I'm running a class right now, and I've stepped out to speak for my 5 minutes, and I'm going back to my class. So the professor and me, I don't know whether people have been sharing slides, but if you don't mind, I might share some slides to be a little bit more visually stimulating, so you don't just have to look at me. Um, so so uh, Thanks so much. I'm really pleased to be part of the faculty joining the Legal Technology and Innovation Certificate. I particularly like it because it has similarities with the lab that I lead and founded, which is Light Lab, so Law, Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship. So a few over the past year or so, I've published a few items in the Hong Kong Lawyer, which is the official journal of the Law Society of Hong Kong. And we talked about, the different shapes of 21st century lawyers now. So Josh mentioned the T shape, right? So some of you may also be familiar with the delta shape. And increasingly now out of the UK, there's the concept of the O-shaped lawyer. So again, one can go into it and touch upon all the relevant aspects of how these can apply to the skill sets of the future lawyer, right? As Josh was indicating, the T shape had been raised, way back by, I think it was IBM that first did it, of, not just having depth, but also width. And that's something I think a lot of lawyers can understand. So then the question is what kind of width that would be. The delta looks at the different aspects of P's now. I think this is the latest third version of the iteration of people, process, and practice. And depending on your role as a legal professional, and they use that term intentionally because, we are not just all licensed lawyers now, right? There are so many roles in which individuals can play in this ecosystem that there will be different emphasis depending on which role you have as a legal professional. And last but not least, the O-shaped lawyer was introduced in London primarily by in-house lawyers as they see what they find lacking in the marketplace. And so this is a really interesting initiative, especially given the lack of the deregulation of the legal profession in the UK. So when I try to distill it a little bit for more layperson's terms, I described it as three mindsets to succeed in the technology age. One needs to be client-centric, one needs to be process-conscious, and one needs to be technology-friendly. Now, what does that entail? And again, these concepts and frameworks are great to hear about theoretically and the like, but how do you actually concretize it? How do you actually implement it? So since this was billed as a teaser, I'm not going to reveal all, and I thought what I would do instead is highlight some of the output, some of the outcomes based on some of the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years. So when I set up Light Lab at Hong Kong U, and the core theory is that it's interdisciplinary and it's experiential, right? So we've introduced hackathon as pedagogy, right? And again, the learning by doing. And besides competing in local hackathons here in Hong Kong, I helped organize the first Global Legal Hackathon here in Hong Kong. And our top team made it to the finals in New York, and they won. So there's talent here where we put together, yes, there were law students, but also practitioners, in-house counsel, and technologists who come together and create tools that solve real problems. In another example, we've introduced students to the computational and e-mooting competition. So where that's concerned, a lot of Mark was talking about blockchain, but how many universities and are actually teaching that? How many of you actually know about blockchain? So nothing like learning by doing. So and Mark talked about online dispute resolution. Who's actually experienced it? How does it actually work? And this is before COVID, okay? Now COVID, everybody knows Zoom. But so, for example, so our students have the opportunity to do moot projects. And last year was focused on blockchain in an e-mooting format. So, for example, and this year I just I did the outreach. So for 3 positions, I have like 34 students kind of going into it. So if you're thinking about the students of the future, the lawyer of the future, they need to understand and appreciate and operate in the online forum, but they also need to engage in the cutting edge technologies and the law that's evolving from that, where universities are not quite equipped to address them. In blockchain, increasingly, as a lot of you would know, a lot of law firms are now creating equivalent kind of new practices around that. So this is literally in the cutting edge. We've supported students in the AI space. So whether it's in AI driving Olympics, in this case, I'm working with computer science students who are doing autonomous driving tools using an open source platform like the Raspberry Pi, right? Another good English design, and to create platforms to learn how to do autonomous driving. And along those lines, we're very fortunate to have in our first year also a team that competed in the Iron Tech Law Challenge run by Georgetown. It's a very prestigious event where in the US they're promoting technology centered lawyers, where the competition requires the students to ideate, prototype, and create technology tools for access to justice in conjunction with an NGO. And this year, because of COVID, we couldn't go to DC, but our team won the finals with an NLP-powered data bank, so natural language processing data bank that addresses workers' compensation and the calculation of that. So this team, and full credit to them, they're so entrepreneurial. They subsequently then set up their own company. They've incorporated, they've won more competitions, and they're now an incubatee in the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park. So these are some kind of reflections upon what outcomes based on the teachings that we have that has generated from our students. So could this be of interest to some of you out there? And why am I talking about this? What are my qualifications? So I had a fairly conventional law career. I started at what was then called Mallesons over in Australia. Then I moved to New York and I joined Sullivan Cromwell, New York. And as a mid-level associate, moved to Silicon Valley to do .com IPOs. Which what goes up must come down. Came back to New York and then was headhunted to join Credit Suisse. So I worked in-house covering IPOs and M&A across the Asia Pacific. And I was on the executive council of the Corporate Counsel Association. So I know the pain points of law firms. I know the pain points of corporate counsel. But then I got what my wife calls a midlife crisis early. And I left a few years ago to enter into fintech and regtech and then law tech. And so besides doing research on AI governance and blockchain governance, I got recruited into academia only about a year or so ago. So this is my second year where we've introduced some of these programs. And it's really putting into practice what I have learned firsthand in the ecosystem and for the future of the profession, legal profession, as it is more broadly known or understood. So hopefully that's a brief teaser and fills in the remit that Shaq has given me. Happy to answer any questions if there's any time left over for me.